This is Gillette Drafted Head to Head. I'm Greg Sansoni along with Meg Morrison and Sean Francois. Let's get right into it. Does an athlete need to win a championship before being considered one of the all-time greats? Sean.
Yes, they definitely have to have championships under their belts before being considered the greatest of all time. Simply put, that's the standard that athletes are measured by fans, critics, and their legacies. You know, you look at Michael Jordan, 6 championships. You look at Wayne Gretzky, 4, Mark Messier, 6. These are all greats, but people that have been able to lead their teams. But at the end of the day, athletes who haven't won championships aren't looked at in the same way. Look at Dan Marino, for example, has not won a championship, is always talked about as a great quarterback and at the top of the statistic books, but not a winner. The same thing with players like Karl Malone and John Stockton. Karl Malone, 2nd leading scorer of NBA history, and John Stockton, the all-time assist leader. And it's the same situation. Unfortunately, they ran up against 2 hot Chicago Bulls teams, but at the same time, they're not talked about in the same way that the other greats of the game, like Bird, Magic, Jordan, Bill Russell, those kind of guys, they're just not talked about in the same way. So I think you have to have championships under your belt to legitimize your legacy and being talked about as, the GOAT, the greatest of all time.
Do you agree?
Actually, I disagree. The way that I've kind of looked at this is I've split it up into 2 things. There's individual sport and then there's team sport. In individual sport, absolutely. You have to win the Masters, you have to win, at Wimbledon, you have to win those to be considered one of the greatest of all time. However, my look at this is in a team sport, because a team sport is, in my opinion, harder than an individual sport. So you don't see, like a 3rd string quarterback, he'll still get the Super Bowl ring, but he won't ever be considered one of the greats. And you just have to, I think that you have to kind of look at individual talents on a team. For instance, would Sidney Crosby ever have a cup if he was winger, or if Cabby and I were his wingers? Probably not. It's 2% of all NHL assists are unassisted. So every time that you can kind of give out an assist to somebody, it means that your teammate had to help you out with it. So I don't think that you do have to win a championship to overall be considered one of the greatest of all times.
Sorry, did you mean 2% of all goals are unassisted?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, you said 2% of all assists are unassisted.
Oh, sorry, 2% of all goals are unassisted. Yeah.
So given that you don't have to win a championship in order to be considered one of the greatest of all time, in football, for example, Joe Montana is considered by many to be the greatest quarterback of all time. But if you don't need a championship to be considered that, then if you look at Dan Marino's numbers compared to Joe Montana's numbers, Marino actually has about 20,000 more yards over his career than Montana. Would you make an argument that Dan Marino is better than Joe Montana?
I would, actually. Dan Marino had a perfect season. He just didn't get the Super Bowl, but he's still considered top 5 of all time. You look at LeBron James. If he was hit by a bus tomorrow, he would still be considered one of the greats of all time. And I think right now he's even in top 3. Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle. Roger Maris, always batting before Mickey Mantle, made it so hard on pitchers that if they weren't to pitch to him, if they wanted to just walk him, he wouldn't have gone yards 61 times. So there's so many instances of all these greats that if there wasn't a teammate helping them out, and you know what, I don't think that they need the championship.
Sean, I look at a guy in baseball like Ted Williams. Never won a World Series. Would you not, based on your definition, consider him one of the greatest of all time?
No, that's probably the caveat. People like Ted Williams, like Ken Griffey Jr., Ken Griffey Jr., a future Hall of Famer, that's someone who hasn't won, but at the same time, they have shown what they can do individually. And I think baseball is a bit of a different beast in that regard because of all the statistics. It's a statistic-driven sport.
Okay, so let me give you another example in another sport. Charles Barkley, who was voted one of the greatest NBA players of all time.
That's right, top
50. 0 rings.
That's correct.
So you disagree with that decision to put Charles Barkley among the all-time greats?
No, he's an all-time great, but he's not one of the greatest. There's many other names that are going to be put ahead of him.
But he's among 50 of the all-time greatest, according to what the voters said.
That's right, and unfortunately, the top 50 are going to include players who haven't been in that list. Megan had mentioned LeBron James as being an athlete who she thinks is in the top 3. I completely disagree with that because he hasn't won a championship and he hasn't even played for the duration of his career as we expect to see him play through. But I believe that it's possible to be a great player and be known as a player who can, who's been able to get it done, but not put in the same category as greatest of all time. Greatest of all time to me is at a different level. You're talking about people who've proven that they can win under pressure, championships under pressure, not just individual accolades, being able to have the full caveat, like a Sidney Crosby, who has won the Stanley Cup, he's won Hart Trophy, and he's also an Olympic gold medalist. There's all these things that he's done at an early stage in his career. Alexander Ovechkin hasn't done these things yet. Well, he's won the Hart, but he hasn't won a Stanley Cup yet. That may come in time, but I think in order to legitimize a guy as a greatest of all time category, when you're talking top 50 or top 100, you can always have a list, and there's going to be guys that will make that list. But in order to legitimize that and put you at the top, you have to show that you can win.
Do you want to comment on what Sean said about your comments regarding LeBron James?
Yeah, I completely disagree. I think that what he's done at his age, he's going to be I would say he's going to be the greatest of all time. I will say that right now about LeBron James.
So he's going to be one of the greatest of all time. Is he up there right now based on his body of work?
Not yet. He's almost there, but I don't think that he needs the championship to win that.
I mean, Kobe Bryant is a person who's currently playing 5 NBA championships. He's only won 1 MVP, but at the end of the day, he's led his team to 5 championships. That's what players want. You're talking about LeBron James. He's won 2 consecutive back-to-back MVPs, but he's in a situation where he had to leave Cleveland to go to Miami. He's focused on winning. He wants to win, and he thinks that winning is the most important thing. So if a professional athlete thinks that winning is the most important thing at the time, and they're going to put themselves in a position to win, I think that is, if an athlete thinks that that's the most important thing, and that's what fans and critics and history and legacies are built on, I think that championships have got to be the number one thing that, put someone as a greatest of all time.
Is LeBron top 3 or not?
I would say he's top 3 for sure.
I don't see how that's possible. Michael Jordan with 6 championships. You've got Larry Bird with 3. You have Bill Russell with 11. Heck, he had so many rings he could give one to Barkley. He doesn't even have enough fingers for all the rings he has. So, in my opinion, you have to have the championships to legitimize your true legacy. You're always going to be known as a good player and possibly even a great player, but the greatest of all time, or even to be talked about in that category, you have to have the championships to go along with that.
Every great has a supporting cast. And if you look at all of those teams, they all have supporting casts. And if you look just at NHL, for example, Potvin, Bossy, you have Trottier,
sure,
all supporting casts.
Yeah.
You have Guy Lafleur,
right,
Ken Dryden, Larry Robinson, all supporting casts. And then you look at the Oilers, where you have Gretzky, Messier, Anderson, Fuhr, Coffey, Curry, all supporting casts. So I think it's who you surround yourself with. And I think LeBron does have it right now that he is putting himself in a position to win, but you have to rely on your team to get you there because you're not going to get there on your own. And you have to be able to lead your team there.
So now that LeBron has a supporting cast, is the pressure not on him to win a championship? Otherwise, he can't be considered one of the greatest of all time? Now that he's got the supporting cast in Cleveland, you can argue that he didn't.
Yeah.
Now he clearly does. With Bosh and Wade by his side, does he not have to win in order to be considered one of the greatest?
I would say he does have to win now. I would say that if he doesn't win now, that there's some kind of a problem because he's already got so many stats to back it up. But I think he will win now.